Hi, my name is Nick. I'm the lead developer at Accounting Add-ons, and this Getting Started video will explain how to integrate MYOB with Excel using OdataLink. So I'll go ahead and sign up for a trial, and I'll enter my personal details. I get to choose whether I want two-factor authentication turned on, and when it's turned on, you'll basically get an email every time you try to log in with a 6-digit code that you also need to enter in the login process. You get to choose the time zone you're in, which will be used to format the various date modified fields. And lastly, you got to put your email and enter and confirm your password. You got to confirm you've read the terms and conditions, which you can read, and you can also confirm that you're not a robot. Once you've filled all this in, you can click register. Now our system will generate an email, send it to you, and then you need to confirm that it's valid. Now in my inbox, I've received an email, which I'll bring up on this main screen, and it has a link here, and it's just a matter of clicking to confirm that your login is valid. I can now click on the login button and log into OdataLink. The next step is to create your account. This represents the business that will sign up to OdataLink. It's also worth noting that the account is used as the billing entity and whose credit card details will be used when you choose to subscribe. And the account can also connect to one or more MYOB files. A user can actually be associated with one or more accounts. Think of it if you were an accountant. You could actually work with multiple organizations. Each of those organizations would have their own accounts, and you as the user would be invited to manage multiple accounts. So and for the purpose of this exercise, my account will just be my name, and I'll leave the rest of the details as is, and I'll just create account. Once you've created your account, you now need to create your model. And models allow you to control the security around your data. If you had different types of report you needed to create, for instance payroll and sales, you wouldn't want everybody to have access to everything. You would want the payroll people to have access to payroll information and the sales staff to have access to sales information. What you would do is create multiple models and restrict who has access to what. For the purpose of this exercise, we only need a single model, and I'll actually rename it to sales, both for the model code and the model name, and I'll change a data file type to MYOB. Now I recommend you leave the bottom settings intact, but we'll quickly go over them. The login type should be left as anonymous, which means that when we pull the data into Excel, we don't need to provide additional details. We'll leave the archive type as developer, which will speed up when we're developing our reports. And the default start date and default end date controls the amount of data that gets downloaded by default. We'll leave the firewall enabled, which means that when we connect to the data, we need to ensure the IP addresses are authorized. And of course, the model must be enabled. So we'll leave those other settings intact, and I'll click Save to create my model. So now I need to add data files to my model. So I'll go to the Data Files item in the menu. I'll choose Add MYOB File, and I'll choose to log into my MYOB. I'll log into MYOB, and I've chosen the API Sandbox demo, and I'll click Add. And I've added my data file. I now need to return to my model and assign this data file if it's not already assigned. The next step is to choose what endpoints we want to see. So we'll click on Manage Endpoints, and for the purpose of this video, as I said, it's a sales report, so we'll choose Sales All Invoices. So that's basically all the sales from MYOB. Doesn't matter what type it is, whether it's miscellaneous or service or item. And I'll click Save. I can then return to my model. At the very bottom of the model screen, there's this OData feed section that lists the OData feed URL for the API Sandbox demo data file that we've added. I'll click Copy, click OK. So now I'll jump to Excel and I'll go to the Data tab. There's different ways of accessing the OData feed section in Excel, and that depends on the version of Excel. In my version, I can go New Query, from other sources, from OData feed. I'll paste the URL and I'll click OK. We'll choose the anonymous login type, which matches the way we set up our model, and we'll click Connect. We'll select the Sales All Invoices and we'll click Transform. We'll go to the Customer field and we'll expand it to include the name. and we'll scroll across to find a salesperson and do the same process. Expand it to include the name. We can then click close and load. This will bring all the data from MYOB into Excel, ready to be displayed. Because Excel's pulled the data as a separate sheet, what we'll also do is we'll rename our sheets, just to make it a bit easier to manage. So we'll double click on sheet 2 and call it data source, and we'll double click on sheet 1 and call it dashboard. The next step we'll want to do is add the data to the data model, which will make it slightly easier to add our charts. So we'll right click on our query, choose load to, tick the add this data to the data model, click load, and then continue. We'll go back to the dashboard, and now we can add our charts. To add our first chart, we'll go Insert, Pivot Chart, Pivot Chart. We'll make sure it's set to use the data model and that it adds to the existing worksheet, and we'll click OK. We'll place our chart in the top left corner. On the far right section, we'll see two different tables. The bottom one, without the little yellow symbol, is the actual table of data, but we want to use the data model, which is the top one, so we'll expand that. We'll go to the gear, and we'll also make sure it's set to sort the data A to Z, just to make the fields a bit easier to find, and we'll scroll down and find the total amount column, drag it into the value section. We'll find the date, and we'll drag it into the axis section. We'll move the year to the filters section, we'll remove the quarter, and we'll remove the standalone date. And now we've got a chart that shows the data by month for all the years. Now we want to filter it to only show data for calendar year 2021. We'll select that and click OK, and our chart is ready. Now we'll repeat the process to add a pie chart this time. So I'll go Insert, Pivot Chart, repeat the process. We'll expand the fields, sort them A to Z. In this case, I still want the total amount, but I want to break it down by customer name. Once I've done that, I can right click on my chart, change its type to a pie chart. I'll also want to grab the year field so that we can filter the data for the same exact year. And now we've got a corresponding pie chart that shows us the data broken down by customers. And there's two final steps. We'll want to save what we've done, so we'll go File, Save As, Browse. I'll go to my Getting Started Guide video, and I'll call it Getting Started Guide for MYOB and Excel. And now our dashboard is finished. If we want to refresh the data, we would want to go to Data, and then we can click on this Refresh All button. Clicking that will trigger a refresh on all the different data sources that we've added. Once they're refreshed, the charts will be reflected with the change. You won't be able to see anything because the data hasn't changed in MYOB, but that's pretty much it. So that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you found the Getting Started Guide for MYOB in Excel useful, and I look forward to hearing from you. Take care.